Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're at in the world. It could be one of the 216 countries that we have touched sometime in the past. This is the premiere week of the Pagan Show, which is back to the idea that we all live in a reality show. We just don't understand it, and that our lives have meaning, and they are meaningful, at least if nobody else us. And then we're going to explore and examine our community in every way we can. So today's conversation was the idea of on the Facebook page, Ed A. Hubbard and Facebook page Ed the Pagan. And I want to thank everybody who's joined the Ed the Pagan page. It's grown 10% or over 100 people in the last 24 hours. And I'm certainly deeply grateful to that activity. After all, one of the things we needed to go ahead and do is get more attention to our community, and I want to do that. So a little later on, we're going to have a very special treat, which is Jason High-Correll. And he's not a person who gives a lot of interviews, and he's not very that. So we're good with that. We're great with that. And then I have Reverend Don Lewis. We're going to talk about some things, and I'll get into why we're talking. I'm going to give you a little bit more information. But one of the conversations we've had today is, and one that should be coming up soon, is where does the community stand? We've been talking about proselytization and passions and work and all of that. And so it comes down today, what are we allowed to charge for? And what are we not allowed to charge for? And this got to the point where there was a question of an individual that wanted to say, a lot of this activity should be banned in a group. And they were asked directly, where should that ban lie? Is it in readings? Is it in books? And so this argument of commercialization of witchcraft is something we're going to see. The commercialization of paganism is a big issue in our community, and we're going to start to deal with that. And so that's terrific. The second thing is that, as you know, we are, I'm committed to 365 days of this, and we're going to start talking about it and of doing these podcasts. This is day 3, and I also promise to do 1,000 interviews this year. I really do want to get to understand the community. 1,000 separate individual interviews, not the same people over and over again. And last night we had Janet Callahan. We talked about media. And there's a rich desire. We're going to have more about media later. But if you're a media person who wants to talk about your media, please DM me at thepagan@gmail.com. I'm willing to talk about that. And the night before that is Marty about young people. I want to get more young people on here. I'm fascinated by what they want to say and what they want to do. And I can be a big help with that. Beyond that, people are going to do this. People can go out and do a lot of different things. So let me go ahead and one more thing. So people are also talking about, besides the conflicts in the United States and politics, enough people in our community are talking about that right now. But what I am talking about is about keeping your head, and are you looking at your local organizations? Where are you now? So we were talking about the Mutual Aid Society. Who is helping you in your area? It doesn't have to be pagan. It doesn't have to be Christian. It doesn't have to be anything. But start looking at your support edge. So we're going to do the Pagan World Congress. It's coming up next November. I'll have more information about that. And this is part of the show today is, as you know, we've made a 4-year commitment to build a campus in Danville, Illinois. We call it the Correllian campus because we want to teach Correllianism there. But we also want to teach other things. So that is amazing, and I want to be a part of that. Of course you want to be a part of that. And we'll have more. And then we'll talk about Pagan World Congress. I'll talk to more about that later. But let's go ahead, and I want to share this interview that I did with Jason High-Correll. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Ed the Pagan Show's interviews. And today I'm going to talk to the Reverend Don Lewis. He has a far fancier title. I will not try to butcher it today, but it is the most Reverend Don Lewis High-Correll, and he is the retired first priest of the Correllian tradition, and the one and only chancellor of the Correllian tradition, I think, more or less, that you've had.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a very interesting thing. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But also, he's the author of many books. One mystery book is in ancient Egypt. He's done a number of metaphysical books, as well as the famous Witch School Correllian Wicca series, which takes you from absolute beginning through your high priesthood, and is the motivation behind the witch school system. He has done so much into our community, and I happen to call my best friend. But hi, Don, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Um, so let me go ahead and say, this is for a new audience. I'm reaching out to let people know. And one of the things I'm hearing from the younger individuals
Hmm.
is that they think that the top is too crowded. There is really no path for them. No one's reaching out to them. And so one of the things I want you to know is, how did you get started in your path? Because it was a much different path.
Yes, I had a very different path. And before I talk about that, I would want to say to people who feel there's no path for them, your correct reaction to that is to make your own path. But on my path, um, I was born into the High-Correll family. I was raised with Correllianism. I became an initiated Correllian priest at the age of 13, and um, I did not have a lot of the factors in my life that most people in this community had. I was never in rebellion against my family. On the contrary, I was carrying out their wishes in my spiritual path. Um, I did not have uh, problems with my family. They were right behind me. My only problem is how many of them died so early in my life, who I wish were still here now. Although my primary teacher, Lady Crystal, is still here, even all these years later. I, as I say, I was raised with all of these ideas. I was initiated into it at an early age. I was put on a fast track to leadership of our little tradition, our little temple, and became first priest in 1979, which is a very long time ago. And at that time, it didn't mean nearly what it means today. It was a very small tradition, a very inward-looking tradition, and at that time, barely at all public. So a lot has changed in the years since then.
Well, let me offer this. So currently, I believe that the Correllian Wiccan tradition
Hmm.
is the largest Wiccan tradition in the world, probably one of the largest neo-pagan traditions in the world.
Yes, I would have to agree with that.
And so that's a very big reversal from where you were raised to have a
It's
very,
total reverse.
and yet, when people talk about it, I do remember when you were being told about this, when you and Crystal, before
Hmm.
when we were very young, and when we were very much learning about each other,
Hmm.
you were channeling, you guys were doing channels, and there's a lot of this stuff is still on tape that the world hasn't
Hmm.
seen.
Well, one of the big things about Correllianism is ancestor veneration and bringing through the messages of the ancestors. And that is a big part of what we call our first priesthood. And everything that's happened in terms of the explosion in size of the tradition was told to us by the ancestors before I ever turned 20. Um, they laid it all out. Now, did we fully understand what they were saying? Not always. Crystal has made the comment that if she had truly understood it, she would have run screaming into the woods. I think I did pretty much understand what they were saying and watched it unfold.
It,
And if I ever really need proof to myself of the legitimacy of my beliefs, that's the number one thing right there. They laid it all out to me before it happened.
I remember we got a reading
Hmm.
from Rosemary Fletcher at a psychic fair, my very first outdoor psychic fair that I ever held.
Yep, best psychic I ever knew.
And she said that I was going to have a worldwide newspaper and a media company,
Yep.
and relatively soon. I mean,
Hmm.
this was in the early 90s.
Yeah, and that it would put out daily issues all around the world.
And that did happen. And at
That's
the time,
exactly
I
what
thought it
happened.
was going to be like, okay, we have to get rich. And we started doing things of that nature. And all of a sudden, one list came along,
Uh-huh.
e-groups.
Yeah. Well, when she did
And
the reading,
suddenly,
we both assumed she was talking about old-fashioned newspapers. Not at all. But you want to talk about proof? I mean, what more can you ask for?
and so let's talk about, so you got all this training, got accelerated,
Hmm.
even some hint of something that was going to happen. Um, but today, and we're going to talk, we have got another segment we're going to talk about here soon about the patriarch attack on Don Lewis.
Yes.
And there is one. And if he says,
Yeah.
well, he's a male. Well, he is a white male by most definitions, but actually he's a mixed blood.
Yeah.
He just is defined white. We'll talk a little bit about that and what's happening. But really, can we talk about, so what happened with you that took your very small tradition, that and motivated you to work with people to now be a global tradition that was represented in the parliaments? I mean, how did that happen?
Well, a big part of it were those spiritual messages that we talked about because it opened our mind to that possibility. A lot of it was working with you.
Hmm.
And I will tell the story of how we met,
Oh, good.
my point of view. I had moved to Chicago after my mother's death. And I was very frustrated by the relative position of paganism versus Christianity. And I asked Spirit to send me someone who understood this, someone who knew what they knew that we did not know. And shortly after, I met you. And I didn't initially necessarily realize that you were the answer to that prayer, but you were because you came from that background. We met at J&M Psychic Fairs. Ultimately, I believe, as a result of the actions of Eleanor Royce, the Rolls Royce of psychics. But we were pushed together by circumstances, namely the fact that we lived near each other, and it made it convenient for us to share a ride to the fair. And yeah, endless conversations unfolded in those rides. But I found that you did have the expertise that I did not have. I had no clue what Christian churches do. I barely ever even set foot in one, although I'd been allowed to study anything I wanted to study. So I can't say I'd never set foot in one. I had no understanding basically of what their teachings were, what their practices were, whereas you had been trained to be a minister. And it was very eye-opening to someone who is not of that background.
That's true. I was trained, let's be open. I was a Southern Baptist, highly trained Moody Bible Institute member
Hmm.
that was taught evangelical Christianity. And
Hmm.
the seven, what has now become known as the Seven Mountains or Dominionism, and it
Yeah.
was very early.
Hmm.
I belonged to one of those types of churches. Yes, I came out of that very white supremacist background, literally.
And
So,
everything that we see happening now, you were talking about back in the 90s when we first met, because
mhm.
you had been exposed to it as a child. This operation goes back that far.
So, but for you, what is it? Okay, so we met and we brought this out, but what is it why you wanted this out? Why did you need this information out? And we'll talk about the radical way that you did it.
Largely to fulfill the will of the ancestors.
Hmm.
They wanted us to do this, and I was very devoted to the ancestors. I still am.
Hmm.
Um, and of course, my own heart was in the same mission. Um, I've been raised with the idea that we were going to become a large tradition, and that it was important to do that for the future of the whole movement. I also had a great deal of fear of persecution from what we would now call Christian dominionists or white supremacists. My family had a history of suffering from this. My mother told me as a child how her great uncles had been lynched in the 1870s. There was the great shootout of 1876, which is a separate incident. We had had a number of occasions to learn the problem of being in the minority and trying to change our position to one of greater influence was really set to me as part of the purpose of this life.
And so you took a radical chance, and we both did, in the idea of going electronic
Yes.
at a time when that was absolutely opposed, that, the computer, like AI today, was the enemy. People don't remember the idea of computer literacy, the idea of these chat rooms on AOL. And
Hmm.
you started one in 1997, 98.
Yep. It's still
That
going
was
today.
on about.com that still continues today. Yeah.
And that has been a journey all by itself.
Hmm.
Um, to do a single project that long um, certainly has seen many variations. Um, and in it takes a certain discipline to do something like that. But before I met you, I had a wide background in the pagan press,
Hmm.
and I think in some ways that kind of prepared me for this idea. I was accustomed to writing articles and doing illustrations and putting out magazines and so forth. And in a lot of ways, the internet was just the next step of that in my mind, whereas for some other people, it was something so radically different from anything they'd ever experienced that they had trouble integrating it into their thought process.
Not only were you so much before just into the press, and you won awards,
Hmm.
and you worked with Silver Raven and Raven Wolf when she was between the two identities, when she was
Yeah.
in charge of the Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance.
Hmm.
And because of that, you are probably one of, if not the number one artist that has been published in pagan magazines,
I think we would have to say that, yes, because of
especially
the
the
sheer
earlier ones.
volume of work that I did.
Right. And so you did a volume of work, and in that what came probably the instrumental piece that is now available. You can buy it on Correllian Publishing in 8 languages, and
Yes.
or you can go to CorrellianChurch.com and get a free copy.
Yeah.
It is the Five Mystic Secrets, which your mom.
Yes. My mother wrote the Five Mystic Secrets, and I put it together as a book for her and
Hmm.
illustrated it. And it is a basic outline of Correllian thought as it existed in the early 1980s.
Hmm.
It does not go into the depths of everything, but it goes through a lot of things in a very short document. And it was meant in direct reaction to Christian propaganda of the time and the rise of the new right. And so if you were to read it today, you'll notice a lot of references to that movement within it. Um, not always directly, but in terms of the different point of view.
Right. And so that was something that got spread out. And then we got involved with magazines like Psychic Chicago Radio. You did.
Hmm.
You did a great cartoon series for a while called Sci Team inside there,
That was a great cartoon series.
um, which was a public outreach
Yes.
uh, at a time when Xerox got very cheap. Uh,
Hmm.
Photocopying, Kinko's came out and got very cheap in the sense of that you could actually produce 200, 300 magazines.
Yes.
And they were distributed in Chicago, now
Hmm.
pretty rare. But then along the way, you started teaching. So the biggest thing that changed is we were running something called the Daily Spell, which was then what would become the witch school lessons.
Yes,
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that was a high energy time.
that was very much a high energy time. I was heading Holy City Temple in Chicago, and there was a lot of desire for me to write the Correllian understanding of things. As we were saying, my mother had written about this a decade earlier, but not in nearly as much depth. And at the time, I've always had the point of view that if I don't have something meaningful to say, I have no business saying it. But it became clear to me that I did, in fact, have some things that needed to be said that I was seeing that other people didn't seem to understand in the same way. And so I thought that I could write something valuable, and I created the monthly lessons, and they were originally meant for the temple itself. They were adapted to the daily spell, and they became, through a few iterations over the years, what are currently the Correllian Wicca lessons. And we had first tried this back in the 1980s. We had had a desire to create a correspondence school of the sort that was fairly common at that time. Um, but what ultimately came out was far better material. And the reason that it was better is it started from the assumption that the learner had no knowledge of anything. And you helped me a great deal with that by pointing out that, one, many of the people reading it would not necessarily have anything resembling my background or my vocabulary. And that if I wanted them to understand it, I had to, as my mother would have put it, meet them where they were. So I went through it and I made it as accessible as I could make it. I did not just use internal pagan terms. I explained them so that people would understand um, what they were and where they came from wherever possible. I did not just say, we do such and such and such a way. I tried to say, we do this because of this reason or that reason, whatever the reason might be. And it was quite an experience.
It certainly was. And then it came, so the part that I like about this, so you were putting out these monthly lessons.
Yeah.
About 3 years into it, you had 6 people helping you because you had 26,000 tests to,
Yep.
to correct. Because every lesson had a test. And then there was the last lesson also had a clergy test.
Hmm.
And you were so
Much as
behind,
it
even
was
with
today.
6 people. You had 6 dedicated people, the famous
Yeah.
Winnie Joy,
Uh,
Fabricia.
we have the first mentors, Green Owl.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
And a
So, so
backlog of 26,000 tests.
and so it was decided then to automate it. We
Yes.
created the first automated school, and then people really yelled at that. Can you
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about that decision when it was against everything? I mean, Cherry Hill was about starting up about the same time, um, but they were doing such an academic thing. Uh,
Well, our point of view
mhm.
in automating those parts of Witch School that were automated was that we had so many students and so few teachers that we needed to conserve the efforts of the teachers to what was most important. If it was a simple thing that could be automated, it was better to automate it so that the mentor could then answer more complicated questions. Um, it
Hmm.
was not necessary to have the mentors doing what we might call grunt work when there were so few of them. We wanted to reserve them for the more important tasks in the education of the students. For the deeper questions, the more serious questions, um, And with the numbers that we had, automation was the only viable answer. We could have made the choice, I suppose, to eliminate a lot of students, but that kind of would have gone against the whole mission of trying to educate people.
And so Witch School opened as the first public education system. The first degree lessons to this day, 25 years later, we're celebrating 25th year.
Yeah.
You can get a free first degree and of grounding yourself in magic.
Hmm.
And that continues
Yeah.
today.
The
It was
first
very
lesson is
interesting.
on
So,
magic.
so what was seen as technological and bad, you used it to liberate the good.
Yes, absolutely.
And the good here was the time of the mentors to actually teach,
Hmm.
to actually talk to people, to actually answer questions.
Yes.
And
And
not only,
I knew from firsthand experience what was going to happen if you were trying to do everything by hand, because that's how we got 26,000 backlog tests.
Mhm.
Um, but by making that change, we were able to handle the sheer number of people who wanted to learn and still give them good quality education because the mentors were right there to answer their questions, um, while also using technology to do some of the simpler things.
And that would lead the same thing with Magic TV,
Hmm.
Pagans Tonight Radio,
Yep.
um, those sort of things also came out of that idea of teaching to where people were.
Hmm. Well, one of the things we were aware of at that time, which I think is surprisingly still true, there were an awful lot of people who wanted to learn and or wanted to be part of a pagan community and had no opportunity to do so, either because they were geographically limited in places where they could not find any local teachers or community, or because they were physically limited. A lot of the people who came to the school had various physical disabilities that prevented them from going to classes at the local bookstore, for example. Uh, some of the people who became very prominent in the system um, at various points could not even really leave their house, but they were still able to learn with us, which I've always thought was highly desirable.
So,
Because the whole point of learning these things is to grow, to become more spiritual, to become a better person. And every better person takes you one step closer to a better world.
so let's continue. Let's take the story to its most recent. You retired. You
Yes,
retired, but you also, in that same year, stood on the platform of the Parliament of the World's Religions.
yes.
That was not an accident. It was
Oh
something
no,
that the tradition had worked on for a very long time.
30 years.
Absolutely. Arguably even 130 years at this
Well,
point.
that's true.
Um, there's a lot of evidence of it. But can you talk a little bit about that final moment when your career reached what was then its peak, its desired peak, its predicted peak?
Oh goodness.
You moved because you would retire, you would move it on
Mhm.
to new people, to highly trained students, to highly trained priests and priestess.
Yeah. Well, there are several different things all wrapped up in that moment.
Hmm.
But but that parliament was very satisfying in many ways. That moment on the stage was very satisfying. It and it spoke to the fact that through long-term effort, you can change your position from being a more or less outcast minority to having a seat at the table. And to me, that's what that represents. Now, in the Correllian tradition, we have something called being retired in office. And what that means is, yes, I'm retired, but I'm still one of the first priesthood. I still have a certain involvement, as does Lady Crystal. Um, so my being there was still completely normal within that system. But and the idea behind this is that you don't want to lose the experience of your predecessors. You want to continue that going. But the process of retirement was not unexpectedly tumultuous. It was a very tumultuous year or so. But that's going to happen anytime you have a change, a major change in a tradition. And if you look at any of the major traditions, you'll see every time you have a major change in leadership, that is what happens. Some of them keep it a little quieter than others, and usually it gets forgotten after a few years. But when a new person comes in, some of the old people go out.
That's the tradition.
Yeah,
So
it's just
everyone
what
must think
happens.
that. Um, so people must think that you've been this stalwart follower and everything else. Has there ever been a moment that you've questioned your faith?
Yes,
And can you
yes,
tell us about one, and then and how you overcame it? I mean,
I can. I don't know if it's the story you want, but I'll tell you. It was when
hmm
we were doing the pagan leadership conferences in Chicago. And we had come to, I think it was the third or fourth one. And the behavior of some of the high priesthood we were dealing with, not all of them by any means, but some of them was very shocking to me, very underhanded, very treacherous. And that did cause me um, a moment of questioning my faith and my community. And how did I resolve that? It was through the ancestors. Um, the ancestors were a very important part of my life, and I had always relied upon them. And I guess in the end, I would say that I came to the point of view that even if I could not necessarily rely on the community around me, I could still rely upon that base, and that was an immutable truth that I could stand by. That this was there, that it had proven itself through through many things. And so I ultimately said, okay, I'll deal with all this nonsense, and I will trust you that better things are coming, because that's what they said, and they were right.
well, I think one of the important aspects, I remember that moment,
Hmm.
is that instead of dealing with the community and saying, "Oh, we deserve a seat at the table," because that's what they're trying to deny you, was that your right to the table because you didn't come out of their particular systems.
Yeah,
Let's
that
be
was part
honest.
of it.
One of the, let's
Yeah.
be honest. Part of that is
Hmm.
that they were gatekeeping Chicago. Though you grew up in Danville, I was a Chicagoan,
Hmm.
and they were trying to minimize your impact because we were having a big impact.
Yeah.
You know, that was a big thing. We were doing our own thing,
Hmm.
and they didn't like it because it made them have to work harder.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it also made them not the only one.
right. But what you did is that, very importantly, and I think people did, instead of fighting with them,
Hmm.
you pulled back to your tradition. And we
Yes,
continued focusing on our tradition.
I did what I
Uh,
always tell people to do, the next right thing.
mhm.
I didn't waste my time arguing with people. I didn't waste my time fighting a battle I could not win. I went out and fought the battles I could win.
And that would be the Daily Spell, where we were sending out
Hmm.
information, the Daily Goddess News, which at the time was the biggest pagan newspaper for a little while.
Hmm.
The early Witch Fox, where we were very supportive of, you know, the
Hmm.
pagan expos,
Hmm.
a lot of
Let's
things like
not
that,
forget
we
the
were
Pagan
very
Expo.
supportive. But at the same time, you focused on developing your tradition.
Hmm.
And then Witch School came. That
Yes,
changed everything. It did change
it
everything. It
did.
changed everything in the community. It changed everything inside the tradition in the sense of it allowed for structure to be created.
Hmm.
And that's what you focused on. And then we came back, or you came back to the community through those efforts where they wanted you back. They wanted to know how you were doing it, and not so much of you preaching.
Yeah.
Okay, so now today, 2026,
Yes.
what's next for you? Is there a next? Does there have to be?
Yes. As long as I'm alive, there has to be a next. Because
Hmm.
I really could not survive without a next. I think that is one of the characteristics of successful people. You don't just stop. And what is the next thing? Well, it's once again doing that next right thing. If you ask me exactly what that is, I'm sure I don't have a complete answer. More things are to be revealed, but I will continue looking for that next right thing and doing it. And I'm certainly not stopping. One of my main areas of focus is going to be on the local center here in Danville and building that in the future. And this is something, one, it was predicted by the ancestors 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And two, it's something that I've always really wanted to see. I remember in particular talking with Lady Alyssa, who is now the Correllian First Priestess, but was not at that time at the Parliament of the World's Religions in Utah. We were looking at Salt Lake City, and I was talking to her about the desire um, to have a sacred place of our own, with our own temples and resources and so forth, along the same lines, smaller, obviously. And um, my point of view on that has never really shifted.
And the actual goal date, I guess, is May 1st, 2029, which would make it 50
Yes.
years, more or less,
Mhm.
uh, from the time that you became initiated.
Yeah, that would be the 50th anniversary of my becoming first priest.
And so there you go.
And
Uh,
all
and there you go. People
I
always
still
say,
have to survive those years to meet that goal. But at this point, I think I've demonstrated that I can survive pretty much anything.
yeah, manifestation and such. And we'll
Well,
talk
you know
more
what they
about that.
say.
So,
They say that you must be very careful of the people who survive every challenge and every fight, because those are the ones the gods favor. And at the risk of a little hubris, I think that applies to both of us, because the world has thrown everything at us. We always survive. I will survive whatever comes to me
mhm.
and come back better than I was in the first place. And I've done it several times.
And I think this year, throwing ourselves back into the media, back into
Hmm.
the mainstream, 25 years of witch school, you know, that's
Well, I
something.
think one of the main things about being a successful person isn't that you achieve success and then have it forever. Very few people do that. It's that you achieve success and you reinvent yourself as many times as you need to continue to be successful. We don't just reach a plateau and stay there. We constantly have to build in this world. This is a world of transformation. It's a world of accomplishment, not a world of sitting still. And I mean, I could, I suppose, get myself a rocking chair and stare at the wall and wait to die. But that is not really something that I have ever found a particularly appealing um, direction to pursue. And so again, it's finding that next right thing and doing it and overcoming whatever may present an opposition to it.
And there we go. I think that's a powerful statement for folks. And watch, what's coming soon. This is a year of great change. I mean, the world has already changed in so many ways,
Yep.
and it's going to continue to change. And the only thing we can do is how do we respond to it? And it sounds like you've got a plan in place.
Oh, I do.
And so thank you for being here with us today.
Thank
Of
you.
course, Don will be here as part of our experts on at the Pagan Show. As you know, we're developing this sort of discussion, deep conversation, and this is a little bit about how Don got here. Reverend Don Lewis, most Reverend Don Lewis of the Correllian tradition. Um, so thank you, and more to come. Thank you, Don, for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Hi, everybody. Welcome back, and we're going to start another great interview with another individual that I have a lot of respect for. I've been a long friend, as well as one of the more influential people in our community, though you may not know his name. It is Jason High-Correll, or he has a big fancy name. We'll get into that later. But more importantly, what he does is he helps other people every day try to find the path that they want within the pagan world. He does it through being, uh, I believe, president of Witch School and a number of other processes. Um, so here we go. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Ed. How
And
are you
so,
doing today?
oh, good. And so, like I said, we'll talk more about other aspects, but how did you become a pagan? I mean, how did you enter this path?
Well, part of it is I never felt right in church. I always felt a little off. Um, I actually found a book in a library written by Scott Cunningham, and it's one of those things I read it and I was like, this is what I believe. This is everything I believe. Um, um, and that was at 12, 13 years old, and I've been following his path ever since. Um, I came to find the Correllians at a shop called Awakenings, in Westville, Illinois. Fortunately, it's no longer there. Um, but I met some interesting people. They invited me to circle. I started going to different rituals, and eventually I decided that I wanted to become a Correllian. And I studied with Lady Crystal and Becky Penry and got my first degree.
And from there, you've had quite a career. Can you talk about some of the things that you've done? You're now first director.
Yes, I'm first director of the Late Natives tradition since 2013.
Mhm.
Um, I
As well as the head of is it Pure Sanctuary?
Pure Sanctuary, yes, Temple, yes. I became
Oh,
head of that in 2006, I believe. Uh,
so,
it was the it was founded by Becky Penry in 1999, and when I got my first degree initiation, she said I would become head of the temple and become very influential in the tradition. Scared the hell out of me at that time. I'll admit it, and I backed away for quite some time because of that. And ended
mhm.
up the gods know where we need to be. So eventually, I came back and became very got involved with witch school,
helped out with some of the programming for several years. Uh, mentored mentored quite a few people actually through the
So,
system.
so you kind of mentioned that you back away for a little while. Have you ever had a loss of faith that almost took you out of being a pagan, and then you something happened to bring you back?
Uh, yes, honestly, yeah, I did. When my this is before I found the tradition per se. Um, uh, I lost when my senior year of high school. It was after I actually got my first degree, but it was still in that time frame. I lost uh, my grandfather and my younger cousin, my first cousin at the time, and I felt like I needed to be more mainstream. Actually became Catholic for a time period, and um, actually Archbishop Daniel is the one that actually brought me back on my path. They were not. He saw me praying, and he goes, "You pray a lot." I'm like, "Yeah, that's if you want guidance, that's what you need to do." And he goes, "What do you actually believe?" He honestly asked me, "What do I believe?" I went home and wrote down what I believed. It's not being Catholic. It was never being Catholic. It's always been this path. So I came back and started practicing again.
Well, that's terrific. I know a lot of people say the Correllians have a lot of Catholic structure inside of them. The robes, especially,
Yeah,
that's the number one thing.
yeah. Um,
Uh, because you've been very, like you said, have been very formative within the tradition. Um, you've had a lot to say about it. You've had a lot of influence in it. You've had various positions throughout it. Can you talk about that a little bit about what it felt like to actually be an influence in this tradition? I mean, you are, well, cousin of Don. I mean, you're nephew of Don,
yes.
and kind of,
Actually, we were actually looking through pictures, and I am actually, I am a cousin, but I got formally adopted out. He is my uncle. So genetically,
mhm.
I am a cousin to him, but got adopted into the main branch of the family. He is my uncle.
That's
Uh,
an unusual aspect of the tradition. The fact that there is some of this adoption aspects. But
yeah.
can you talk about your influence on the tradition, where you feel like you've made a difference?
Mm, well, for years I was Don's herald. Um, and when he was writing the text and things like that, I helped him with some of the exercises and things like that to actually do with them, and he wrote them down. I mean, it was practical aspects of those exercises, watching me do them, things that didn't work, what worked, um, some of the philosophies I've we've discussed, and I mean that's primarily how I've been influenced in tradition is by
Well,
going through the
I think
pages.
you've been more influential. I mean, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
But you were a product creator. You've helped with the exercises. You've been part of the publishing industry. You've been still
Videos,
are, and you are
the
still
videos. I mean, in in what was it 2005? We started doing Magic TV, now Correllian TV,
absolutely. And
um, filming, as well as I spent a lot of time behind the camera filming. I mean, that was setting up shots, st stage development, set design, um, help with editing of books and text. There's
tarot cards,
tarot cards, yeah.
the tarot of
Well, but
Hecate.
yeah, bringing them back, editing images. Uh, if it has been done, I probably have done it. It's
So, so it is part of your nature, and so there's plenty of things you can do. Have you ever felt that you could uh, not do priesthood things like rituals and things like that? or do you include, or do you do some of that as well?
Oh yes, and I love leading ritual. I love being part of ritual. Um, my actually favorite is watching some of my students do the rituals where I don't have to do anything. Just have to show up and they do it. I love teaching them to do these things and watching them grow.
And I can see that.
Mhm.
And I know you're also part of the Correllian Church, which is really super focused on Danville
Yes.
and building a campus on Danville and doing things for the homeland. You've lived there, so Don went wandering around the world as he did, but you were there in Danville the whole time. You've been there your entire life.
Just about, yeah.
I
In
mean,
this area, yeah, in this area, either on the Indiana side or the Illinois side. It's been
right.
one or the other.
And especially it being the Correllian homeland, and you've hosted a lot of the illustrations that are there. The next one will be held in 2029, which will be the biggest one yet. Um, and a lot of times you've also been an agent of the church because we keep our headquarters there, our legal documentation. I mean, as first director, why don't you explain the difference between like a first director and what we would think of as a first priest or priestess?
First director primarily keeps track of the legal aspects of it. Try to keep us out of trouble, making sure all our stuff is in order with the state and wonderful federal government that we have. Um, the first priest, their primary is the rituals. My job is more the practicality and interacting with other pagan groups as well as other Christian groups outside our faith to try to mediate things. Um, one
And
of the
that's
uns
important. That's
Yeah,
important because we're a global tradition, right?
yeah, yes, we are. Uh, yeah, we have Japan, Philippines, South Africa. Uh,
Oh, I mean, we are in
yeah,
180. We have
mm,
members from 180
yeah,
countries. Temples in more than 40 of them.
yeah.
Yeah, so and that must be very interesting because when you first began, there was just Danville, and
Yeah,
then
I would say it was Danville and Chicago. I mean,
right.
I've watched this group grow from, like I said, a handful of temples to this worldwide phenomenon. I mean,
Hmm.
that's just, and watching this grow thanks
So
to,
where do you go from here? So where do you go from here? I mean, you've had this career where you just basically get started. You've gone through, tested, you had your face tested, and came back. You've been doing a lot of really important work, but where do you go? Where do you go from here?
I would like I said, to actually formally have a physical location here in Danville. We've always been a virtual church, virtual school, virtual, which is very important because that's how we got to all these countries. But I would like to have an actual physical place here in Danville that people could come to and worship and learn, and we can teach and all that stuff here in Danville. Have a museum aspect to it to show our history.
That's a very noble goal. Well, thank you for being here with us today. And as you know, I will have Jason back because um, he has so much to teach us and so much to talk about and so much about the culture. He is actually one of the most, and I mentioned that he's not well known, but he does one thing very importantly that most people don't realize, and he helps set culture. Things that he does help set the Correllian culture as well as the larger pagan culture. And so we'll have him more again. But thank you, Jason, for being.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Clear at work. And thank you, everybody, for having me here today. We're so grateful to have you. And yeah, we'll kind of figure out some of these other things, how to get some of these things to work a little better. But guess what, folks? This is our show. This has been interview 3 and 4. This is show number 3. Tomorrow, I'm going to be back with Eric Cooper, who's going to talk about paranormal. Nope. That's what you know him for. But did you know he has a degree in Homeland Security and that he actually is part of systems that understand some of the things that are going on? And he's going to talk about what pagans need to know about Homeland Security. I'm really grateful to have him. And guess what, folks? This is another show, Ed the Pagan. Tell your friends, share this, amplify it, and make it so.